There are moments in life when the truth you've been carrying finally asks to be spoken. Eugene knows that feeling in his bones. His story begins in a home where safety was unpredictable and silence felt like the only way he could survive. And it follows him into the moment that nearly took his life and forced everything into sharp focus. Eugene shares what it means to rebuild yourself from the inside out, to name what happened, to choose your own power, and to trust that vulnerability can become its own kind of freedom.
I recognized the situation for what it was. Like I really sat with myself and I said it out loud and said, Eugene, you really, you could be dead. Like you literally almost died.
You're listening to the Life Shift Podcast. I'm your host, Matt Gilhooly. This show is built around one simple idea, that sometimes a single moment can change how we see everything. Each week, I talk with someone about the moment that shifted their life and how they learned to live differently after it. These are not stories about having it all figured out. They are stories about what it looks like to keep going once the story changes. Thank you for being here. Here's today's story. Hello, my friends. Welcome to the Life Shift Podcast. I am here with Eugene. Hello, Eugene.
Hey Matt, how are you?
Doing well. Thank you for wanting to be a part of the Life Shift Podcast. It is, and I say this every single time, but it's really like this unexpected journey in which I'm kind of healing little parts of me that I didn't know still needed to be healed by listening to other people's stories. So thank you for just wanting to be a part of it.
Yeah, amazing work that you're doing here. Thank you so much for having me.
Well, like I said, thank you for wanting to be a part of it. It is kind of weird to think that I've been able to speak to over 200 people from all over the world, people that I probably never would have bumped into in my life, right? I think these kind of open the door to these opportunities. But the best part is these deeply personal stories that I get to hear. And with the goal of not me hearing them or having the conversation, and maybe not you telling them, but other people out there are going through things in their lives. And a lot of times they feel really alone in that circumstance. And so I think by hearing other people's stories, we kind of give them permission to start sharing theirs and to maybe feel just less alone and kind of move through the world a little differently.
Yeah, and I agree. I think having some type of community is super important, and letting people just kind of know that they're not alone in their emotions is oftentimes something that, that I've discovered can be really supportive to them. So I think, again, the work that you do here on the Life Shift is amazing. And I think that a lot of times people can take so many things from this show. And I'm super, super excited to be here.
Before we get into your story, maybe you can tell us who you are moving into 2026. Like, how does Eugene show up in the world? Like, how do you identify these days?
Yeah, so a whole bunch of things. I'm a son, I'm a friend, I'm a brother, but more so, I like to kind of think of myself as a conscientious member of society. I try my best to remember that it's so important to learn. In 2026, I'm 23, and I think I have a lot of different life experiences that oftentimes people are like, at 23? Yeah, and I think that that's okay. I think, I'm a learner. I'm getting my MSW from Columbia, and I try to always just do my best to kind of lean in with curiosity. So I think overarchingly, Eugene in 2026 is a curious individual, open to learning, open to hearing people's stories, and telling the truth about, where I've been. I recognize has, become a part of how I help others find their voice. And that's all Eugene. I'm in social work school, so all of that is social worky for me.
Yeah. Do you feel that your life experiences have brought you to want to do this kind of work?
Absolutely, man. I think, when my traumatic event happened, I was just about to start social work school. And I think that because I carry that experience with me, I'm the type of person that wears, his heart on his sleeve. And I'm very honest, very vulnerable. And I think that within reason, I carry that with me in every single day, whether I'm with clients, whether I'm in the classroom. I just always try to remember the experiences that I've had and the significance that it has to me. And, I try to put that same passion into my work and how I show up.
Yeah. And were you always open to vulnerability and sharing how you felt? Is this something that was always part of you?
That's a good question, man. I think, yeah, I grew up kind of seeing vulnerability like, through my mom. I'm very close with my mom. She's always just modeled the importance of vulnerability. And I also just, in my opinion, I feel like being vulnerable is like your greatest superpower. Like if you're honest and you're vulnerable and you're just like real with yourself, it's much easier to kind of show up in the world. The world that, demands so many different things. If you're vulnerable and you're honest and you're real with yourself, even though sometimes it's not always the easiest thing to do, you feel more comfortable in this world that's just full of, the stuff that it is. So that's what I've learned. And I think I've always been like that.
Well, that's fantastic, and kudos to your
Thank
mom
you.
for raising a man that can do that. Because I think some of us had to maybe mask for a long time that that vulnerability, and now kind of moving through the world, I see being as vulnerable as possible is what helps other people relate to me way more than anything that we were kind of taught to mask as a child. I was taught, or society taught me as a kid with a dead mom, like I couldn't show that I was sad. I couldn't show that it really upset me or I was missing her. It was more, you're a boy, you don't cry, you can be mad and you can be happy. Right, exactly. But at the same time, now that I'm in my 40s, it's like, bring on the tears, bring on whatever I need, because like I should be able to have a full gamut of emotions because I'm
Exactly.
a full human being. So I love that you've had it.
I appreciate that, man. And you know what? Like now that I kind of think about it, there are moments where I had to mask too. Like my story, like you said, it's traumatic. It's enduring domestic violence. And I think that, when you are in that space, at least in my experience, I have to tell a lie every day, and that was that I was okay. I have to tell a lie every day that I was safe when I wasn't. And I think when you mentioned masking and being vulnerable, that brought up a lot for me actually. I think that when I was much younger, I did those things. I would mask and say that I was okay. But I think now that I'm older, I recognize the power of vulnerability because now I have the vernacular, now I have the verbiage to say I am not okay. I have the verbiage to say, okay, like when I'm in this circumstance, this is how I feel, and I know that I'm okay to be in a position to be safe enough to be able to share that with others. When I was younger,
I don't think
I
it's
don't
the
know,
verbiage though. I think it's the
talk
safety.
to me. I think exactly. I think when I was younger, I didn't feel safe enough to do that.
Right.
And I
There's a
think
fear.
now that I've gotten older, like I've been able to kind of feel like I can take the world by storm. If there's something that I want to do, I'm gonna do it. And that's it. I think now I feel more grounded in my safety. And when I was younger, again, enduring domestic violence, I felt like I had to mask and I felt like I had to say I was okay when I wasn't.
Yeah.
Really good point there.
Well, why don't you kind of paint the picture of your life leading up to kind of the first or main pivotal moment that you feel kind of changed you from one second to the next? And go back as far as you need to. You gave us a little insight into your childhood, but whatever you need to show us the before version of Eugene.
Yeah, I'm trying to like think the best way to kind of like explain it. So I think before everything like changed, before I got here, I think I was doing what many kids and young adults do in families that are touched by violence. I learned how to like read moods. I learned how to like stay alert and make myself small to avoid conflict. And I didn't realize how much that was hurting me. And again, like I was young.
Was that always
And
what your home life was like from birth to that unsafe feeling?
there was a part of my life when I was much younger where I felt like I was safe. But I think from like probably like age 5 until age 21, I didn't have that safety. And like that's a big chunk of somebody's life. Those are all like the formative years. Those are all the formative developmental stages of your life. You know what I'm saying? And I think that for me, I felt like I was scared. I felt very scared growing up because of the uncertainty. Nobody loves feeling the feeling of uncertainty. And again, surviving domestic violence. Not too long ago, I survived in an incident where I almost lost my life. And that was really traumatic for me. And I think that well, the one thing I can say is that growing up, I learned the power of betting on yourself. And I learned the power of trusting yourself and trusting that if you endure something, if you have the intrinsic motivation, you can get through it.
Hmm. Yeah. So, I mean, I'm sorry that you had to face that. And I don't know I mean, it's a huge pivotal moment, but there's also other moments in your life that feel power. But I'd love to, love is the wrong word. I'd like to ask you, you grew up in this household in which you were fearful, but you also grew up in this household where you felt love from your mother and saw the vulnerability and you saw all these things. So it's a very tricky balance of like feeling safe but also not safe, and kind of moving through the world. Was this incident where you nearly lost your life, was this the first kind of experience that was like that intense, or was it a buildup? Was it something that started small and then eventually kind of over the years grew to this big event?
That's a really great question, Matt. And exactly, it started small and then over the years it grew into this big event. Never in my life, Matt. Never in my life did I think that, after graduating with my undergrad, being so excited, having this great moment, 3 days after, I would be faced with a situation where it's life and death. And I think, yeah, it was a situation where, because domestic violence looks very different for different people. There is financial abuse, there's manipulation, there's so many different things that can kind of accompany the domestic violence umbrella. And I could definitely say that over the years, there's been things that have led up to this incident. And it was not just like one simple, like, oh my gosh, it just happened. There were signs. And held space for early, like you mentioned, it was tricky for me because it was like, okay, I'm seeing vulnerability, I'm seeing love, I'm seeing strength. And then on the other side, I'm seeing, I'm feeling emotions of like just uncertainty, feeling emotions of being scared. And I think feeling the emotions of uncertainty can make you feel scared. You know what I'm saying? Because you don't know what's going to happen. You don't know what the impact it's going to have on you. You don't know what the impact it will have on the people that you love. But I do feel like it was something that had kind of festered. And, I think sometimes when you're blowing up a balloon so much, it can only take so much air before it pops. And I think that's how it was. I think the situation needed to pop. The pimple had to pop, and it popped.
Yeah. And was part of I mean, this was a male figure in your life. Can we say that?
Yeah.
We're removing it from your mother, because it sounds like your mother was the vulnerable element in your life, showing you heart and grace and all the things that mothers can do with all the power that they have. And you said you were like 21, 20 when this happened? Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, and a part of it makes me wonder if there's an element of that love that you shared with your mom that kind of creates more of that explosive type feeling there as well. This was a physical event that happened?
Ah,
Okay.
physical event, man. And I've learned how to have radical acceptance. I've learned how to recognize a situation for what it is. And
It's much harder when you're in it. It's
it's
much harder to see
so
someone else,
hard.
to see your own, but much easier to see someone else's.
Oh, that's a word. That's real, man. That's so true because it's like I think it's one thing to kind of like read about it. It's one thing to kind of like hear somebody else kind of share their story, but then like when it's happening to you, hard. And it wasn't an easy thing
Plus, it was
to
normalized
do.
for you.
And
I
it was
mean,
something that was normalized,
right? Since
right?
you were 5.
since I was five. And, we're living in a society, again, like you kind of pointed out, where it's like, okay, if men show their emotions, they're weak. If men show their emotions, it's like an attack on their masculinity, when really it's okay to kind of feel your emotions. It's okay to kind of be vulnerable and talk about your emotions. And, I faced my own, situation with that when I was being vulnerable. I was met with people that said, what did you do to deserve it? Or I was met with people that said, like, was it really that bad?
And
Like,
before this event, or
after.
okay, because of that.
After, because of the stigma that is entrenched in our society, that men aren't supposed to like feel, and men aren't supposed to have emotions. I was met with people that have said, like, like the most hurtful things, but the reality is the situation happened, and I had to have radical acceptance, and you know not really judge the situation. Well, it's okay to judge the situation, but not like, this is bad, this is good, but just recognize it for what it is, and then more so focus on how I can heal from a situation and the power that I have in myself to say, I forgive you, and this is how I'm going to move forward in my life.
Yeah. So would you say that this super tragic, traumatic event, would you say that like from one moment to the next you were different, or do you think that kind of was prolonged? Because I think a lot of us, I do say that that moment that my dad said that my mom was dead was really a shift in me. But then it's like 20 years later when I realized what I was carrying and was like, oh, I got to let go of that scared 8-year-old, was another moment. And sometimes it's like saying the things out loud to, for me, it was a therapist and being like, these are all the things I had told my story way a lot before, but it was when she reflected back on me, it was like, you were doing that with a scared 8-year-old brain, every decision you've made since until your 30s. So do you see this as a really big turning point in the violence act, or did it come later, or both?
I feel like it's a little bit of both. Like, I feel like it was kind of similar to like what you kind of shared. Like, I realized, like, I, I realized the shift when I was talking to like a few of my friends, and I was like, this really just happened to me. I almost lost my life. And they were like, Eugene, like, you said that so like nonchalantly, like that, like it didn't happen. I was almost like on autopilot. It was because I was, again, it was normalized for me, but that one experience, I've never almost lost my life before. And the way that, my friends who were men kind of took care of me and held the space for me, and even identified with what I was talking about and shared that they also experienced something very similar, showed me that it was bigger than me and showed me that there's so much power in being vulnerable. But I think the moment that changed everything was when, you know, I recognized the situation for what it was. Like, I really sat with myself and I said it out loud and said, Eugene, you could be dead. Like, you literally almost died. And I think that idea kind of helped to kind of shatter the idea that I could just kind of push through the danger or pretend that things weren't as bad as they were. It forced me to kind of recognize and face the reality of domestic violence in a way that was just really raw, terrifying, and almost like impossible to hide from, especially because I had friends that I confided in that held that space for me and identified with something that I had endured.
Yeah. Was it, and this is not a really a yes or no question, but it kind of is, and this is just assumption, so forgive me if it's totally off, but did that release maybe a shame that comes along with facing something for so long? And I say that because sometimes we take on this blame, we take on this shame that something happened to us when it clearly wasn't our fault. And no one deserves that, but somehow we are like, oh, I can't tell anyone about this because you had those people in your life that were like, well, what did you do to deserve it? So by sitting with that, did it release something in you that something along those lines?
Yeah, it honestly, Matt, it set me free and it saved my life because it it released me of the burden that I was carrying. Like I was so down on myself. Like
Were you being destructive or anything? I think sometimes that can happen.
I wasn't necessarily being destructive, but I think I was more so like I think like when that something like that happens of that magnitude of trauma, y- your brain is just trying to kind of process that. Your brain is trying to figure out what that means. Your brain is, trying to process it, but your body is saying something different. And I think with that comes a series of emotions. I think for me, I had so much shame because again, like when this happened, it was public. So it wasn't like it was happening behind closed doors like other incidents. People saw this, and I felt so bad, and because I was like, oh my goodness, like this is something that people are actually seeing, and I was embarrassed. I was embarrassed that this had happened, and I was more so shameful after it happened, and I kind of, took time to kind of take care of myself after and really sit with my own emotions. And I was shameful because it was just like, wow, Eugene, you really waited so long to kind of, you know, be very vulnerable. Because I've always been a vulnerable person, like I shared earlier. I've always been somebody who's wear his heart on his sleeve. Always been very honest in my own honesty, in my own opinion, being very, very vulnerable. But when it came to things like that, domestic violence, that's not something that I feel like I was always open to talking about until after I almost lost my life. After that, experience, Matt, I knew that there was no way that I can continue being quiet. There's no way that I can continue not, you know, speaking out about things like this because my life was spared, and I feel like my life was spared for a reason.
I mean, that's very big of you. I
Thank
I
you.
also think that maybe you didn't, or people in your circumstances don't say much because people don't talk about it much. I think, and this is totally, I don't know why, but ignorant of myself to automatically associate domestic violence with a spouses, not with children, not with like, and so those are like, you hear stories of child abuse and those kind of things, and you feel like those are like isolated in their own bucket. And so when you say domestic violence, it kind of opens my eyes to think, wow, how many people are keeping this at bay because safety of their other parent or safety of themselves or their family members, or they're afraid that of retribution if they do say something. So, it's very big of you to, one, have radical acceptance, two, have some kind of forgiveness in your heart. I don't think anyone would blame you if you didn't, but I think it frees you probably more so.
Exactly.
It's more for you than it is
Right.
for the other person. Did the other person get their comeuppance? Did they get their trouble
Yeah.
taken care of?
They they got their well, they certainly got their trouble,
Okay, because it was
but
public.
it was public. But that trouble is over. And, I think for me, the one thing that I want people to recognize is that when you hang on to things that people have done to you, regardless of the circumstance, that keeps you tied to that person, that keeps you connected to that situation. Actually, let me, rephrase that. I think it can keep you tied, it can keep you connected, but it doesn't always have to. And I think what I was recognizing was that it was keeping me connected, it was keeping me angry, it was keeping me upset. And I think when I learned to let it go, and I learned again to have radical acceptance, and it also came a point where I had to do EMDR, eye movement desensitization reprocessing therapy, because what was happening with me, man, was I was having intrusive nightmares, having these crazy symptoms after that event. Because again, it was very traumatic.
Yeah,
And
the body
when
keeps the
you have
score.
your body, that's a good book, by the way. That's a really good
Exactly.
book, by the way. And what was happening is like with the trauma, it gets stuck in your brain, and with EMDR, it allows you to push through it safely. And I think after I went through my EMDR sessions, I was able to like sit with the emotions and really be able to say, I don't agree with what you did, but I forgive you because I have to forgive you because I am going to school to be a social worker, hold space for people, support them. And I don't want my emotions that have been tied to this incident to spill over into my work and spill over into the space that I want to be able to hold for other people. So I forgave this person and I forgave the situation with radical acceptance because I recognized the power that it could have over me, Eugene.
Do you remember what made you say, okay, I'm going to do it? I'm going to forgive? Was there a trigger moment or was it just what it looked
Yeah.
like?
Shirley wasn't dry eyes. It was very wet face, tears. And I think I was just sick of it. I was tired. And I keep bringing it back to like sitting there holding, having my friends hold space for me the way that they did. Like having that brotherhood, having that camaraderie, having people around me like that, especially men that are vulnerable and that are saying like, Eugene, like this happened to me too. Hearing that and like knowing these people for such a long time uh, showed me that like, listen, I have to forgive this person because I recognize that this other person might have been holding on to something that they might not have had, the space or the opportunity to feel like they could be very vulnerable or they could be honest. And I didn't want that for myself. And in order for me to take care of myself and kind of almost like set myself free from that situation, I had to forgive. And I also have a little brother who is the light of my life. And I want to show him that when you are in the midst of an adversity, you can come out with a story of resilience. It's up to you to do that. And I want it to be a good example for him.
So, what did the next day after you decided to forgive? What did that next day when you woke up? Did you feel different?
I felt awful. I felt ter like I felt terrible, man. I felt awful, honestly.
Honesty,
I
love
felt
it.
off. I felt terrible. Like I said, I was not doing well at all. I felt terrible. Like I had like this like pit in my stomach. I was going back and forth like, should I really do this? Should I really forgive this person? And I just kept choosing myself every single day afterwards, where like if I see this person on the street, I can nod my head, acknowledge, and move on and get in my car and go get my coffee and feel fine. Like, and not have any like negative emotion
No
after it.
triggers or anything?
No triggers,
Good.
because I think what happened for me was again like that EMDR was incredibly helpful for me. And
Had you done any other kind of therapies before that?
yeah, I
Okay.
I I love therapy. Like my mom's a psychotherapist and I love my therapist. My therapist hate to see me coming. Like I love therapy. I think it's a great way to kind of take care of yourself. And so I've always been in therapy. Like not necessarily because, and I think a lot of times with therapy, people are like, oh, like what's wrong with you? Why do you need to go to therapy? Like that's not the reality. Therapy could be a great tool for you to kind of help map out your life. You know,
A
I'm
lot of
somebody
people say
who's
coaches are like that.
coaches are like that too. Like, and there's nothing wrong with it. I think that but specifically doing EMDR, having a type of psychotherapy like that could be heavy. Listen, that showed me um that if you want to get through something, you can do it. Because when you're going through EMDR sessions, you're like reliving the trauma, man. Like you're literally reprocessing it all over again. And again, for me, like I told you, I felt that like pit in my stomach after I forgave the next day. And I was like, oh my gosh, should I really do this? And again, I just kind of chose myself. I was like, can I take this back? Like, and and I always tell people, like, it's you versus you in this world. You get to decide the person that you want to be. You get to decide how you kind of want to, like, respond to different situations. And I just chose me every single day. I always say it's you versus you. And that's how I took my power back. That was I think that was the biggest pivotal moment in my journey of healing. Like that's where it was.
How do you move through the world differently now than, say, 2 weeks before graduating from your undergrad program? Like how do you like what's your how are you different in that way?
Having grace and having gratitude. I think
So what were you doing before?
I think I was still doing that. I think I was having grace and having gratitude, but I don't think I was being as intentional with doing that and being very intentional with verbally extending grace to people. I always make it the point to tell people, that you're a good person, you are loved, you know what I'm saying? You deserve to be here because I recognize that you don't know what people are going through. I lived every single day of my life from 5 to 21 being a survivor of domestic violence, and I literally almost lost my life. And if like I could have went down the street and nobody could have known. So I always try to be very intentional with the things that I do and the actions that I take because you don't know people's stories. You don't know what people are going through. And sometimes it just takes one person to kind of have somebody feel like they are acknowledged and that can save their life.
Yeah. It's the power of community that you mentioned before. Do you think you would
Powerful.
have lost your life if it wasn't in public?
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. Absolutely. I think that if certain people weren't there to help kind of prevent it, we wouldn't be sitting here.
Yeah.
We
Does
wouldn't
that
be
give
sitting
you a
here.
different like lease on life? Do you do things differently because you're like, "Oh, life is actually short. It can be short for a lot of people."
It does. I think I don't think I was as like vulnerable as I am now in kind of sharing my story and confidently saying I'm a survivor of domestic violence. Um,
Do you think there's still a stigma for that?
Absolutely,
Yeah.
absolutely. Like I was
More so
somewhere,
for a guy?
yeah, absolutely. I was somewhere speaking, and when I said outwardly I'm a survivor of domestic violence when I was introducing myself, somebody came up to me and was like, "Oh, I thought like your wife beat you." I was like,
Mhm.
what? Like, I don't think people
Yeah.
recognize the domestic violence umbrella. Yeah, like, and I think it's no fault to them. I think education is very important, and I think having conversation with people is very important, and just being open to like hearing different perspectives. So I think that there's definitely a stigma that's still there, and I think, well, my goal is to continue kind of sharing my story and, sharing my book with people and helping them kind of see through different narratives that domestic violence can look differently to different people and how you can go through an adversity, you can come out with a story of resilience.
This is going to sound really rude, but it's
Go
not
ahead.
meant to be rude.
Go
Do
ahead.
you,
Go
do
ahead.
you feel a need to save other people like you were?
Yeah, no, that's a good question. Honestly, no. I think that sometimes some people can. But I think I try to be very intentional again with the actions that I take and my intentionality. I recognize everybody has their own journey and that everybody's journey looks very different. My journey could look very different from your journey, man. And I recognize that everybody, like for example, for somebody that might be in a situation that was similar to mine and being in a domestic violence situation, I think oftentimes we want to help and oftentimes we want to be like the saving grace. And sometimes what people need is just to know that they have support. Whatever decision that they decide to make, they have support. That person that is enduring whatever that might look like for them, letting them know that they have support, I think can move mountains for them.
Yeah. Being heard is so important. I think that
Yeah,
because I'm sure you felt in this situation, I can't tell anyone for many reasons, but one being that I might be the only one going through something like this, so no one will understand. Meanwhile,
yeah,
your friends were going through it, you didn't know,
exactly, man.
right?
I had no clue. I had no clue. And I think that's the power of being vulnerable. You don't know what people are going through. And I think that what I like to do would be very honest and be very vulnerable. Again, like I keep saying, vulnerability is like your superpower. And I think for me, it was more so like recognizing the fact that me being quiet and staying silent, it's not doing anything. It's not helping anybody. But if I'm honest and I'm vulnerable and I hold space for people and I keep spaces where I'm able to kind of share my experience, you don't know who's gonna resonate with that. I did a book talk at a university where I reside, and somebody came up to me after a older male, and he said, Eugene, you literally just told my story. And he started bawling in the room with 60 people that were there, bawling. And that's the power of vulnerability. Don't know how it's going to land with people, and you don't know the space that you might create to allow somebody to feel their emotions in a world that doesn't always allow for that.
Yeah. Do you ever play in the multiverse in which there was a version of you that was like 10, 12, and you talked to your friends about it and you guys all discovered that you were going through similar things and think about what life would look like if you had known?
Yeah, absolutely. And I do that all the time, but at the
It's
same
not
time,
healthy,
I
but
it's not healthy. It's not healthy at all,
but we
Matt.
do it.
And I think that's like you're human. We're human. We do that. And I think at the same time, I always try to tell myself I don't like reading my chapters backwards. I try to always kind of rewrite them, and I try to find ways that I can make, you know, that draft a best-selling book. You know what I'm saying? Because there's so much power in the person that, you might become after enduring whatever. And I think that for me, when I have conversations about like, okay, how I could have handled the situation when I was, 6, 12, or, 15, like sometimes like your brain can kind of get stuck there and you can kind of get like down on yourself. And I think for me, it's not doing me any good, you know. But what can kind of be more helpful is recognizing how much you've grown and what you've kind of done to kind of, take care of yourself in the future, what that looks like for you moving forward.
A lot of us play that game where we just like, oh, well, what if I had, taken a left instead of a right or
Instead
whatever?
of a right.
Maybe. Yep. What made you just mentioned your book. Like, what did that process look like?
Yeah. Resilience breaking the chains. I think for me to be able to heal from my situation was writing. I think writing saved my life. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Writing saved my life. Like it's 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 a heavy book because it's talking about, domestic violence and how you can go through an adversity. While it's fiction, it's based off of things that are real. I think that writing, I literally told myself, okay, I'm gonna write 5 to 10 pages a day so I can heal. And it was really so like more so out of like a journal for me. And I said, you know what? I'm not even gonna tell anybody that I'm gonna publish this. I'm just gonna publish this book. And when I did so, the amount of support that I got was beautiful. You know what I'm saying? There's so much power in vulnerability, man. So much power in vulnerability. So much.
Yeah. Do people know it's based on your story?
Yeah, I think
Okay.
some people know. I
Yeah.
think some people know. Uh,
Was it easier
yeah,
to do it as fiction than to do it as your truth?
yeah, yeah. I think it was easier to do that fiction because I think the content that in the book could be heavy. I think there's some parts of it that some people might feel like, oh my goodness, like I'm gonna read this book, but it's like I'm thinking about Eugene at, you know, when he's in elementary school. I'm thinking about Eugene when he's in high school. And like you can almost kind of like blame yourself. But I think having the book as fiction can kind of like save you from that. While you're valid to feel whatever emotion you're feeling, I purposely want to try to as fiction so people can kind of recognize the significance of domestic violence and what that looks like. Again, it's fiction, but these things are real. These are real people's stories. Like it's real.
Yeah. So what's your big audacious goal? Because you're only almost 23, or are you 23?
Yeah, I am 23 now. I published it when I was 22, but I'm 23 now. I think my big goal is just to kind of, you know, continuing to provide the space for people to heal in whatever way feels better for them. I know what it's like to be trapped in a society where, you're enduring something like domestic violence and not feel like you can say anything or not have the space where, that's something like that is okay. And my goal is to always, be vulnerable and encourage other people to do the same. Encourage other people to do the same thing because vulnerability is your superpower.
Yeah. Are you someone that kind of plots their future, or do you take day by day?
I think I used to, but then I think when I almost lost my life, I was like, no, I'm gonna live every single day like it's my last because you never know what that's gonna look like. And I've just taken a lot of great comfort in taking things day by day, you know? Like, 'cause you don't know what your day's gonna look like. You don't know what that might look like,
Yeah.
you know?
Yeah. Always curious. If you could go back to the Eugene on the morning of that traumatic experience, is there anything you would want to whisper in his ear or tell him?
You're gonna be okay. I think the one thing that I've done after is I have affirmations all over my apartment and I try to just kind of speak life into myself because, after you leave your apartment, it's you and the world. And I think if you have a good sense of self and you're able to kind of speak life into yourself and reassure yourself and support yourself in that way emotionally, nothing can stop you. And I think if I can go back on that morning, I would tell myself, you're going to be okay. And regardless of what this day might bring you, you will be okay. Whatever that might look like, you're going to be okay, Eugene.
Do you think he would have believed you?
I think at that moment, no. But I think now, absolutely. Because I know that I have the power to take my own power back. Before, I think I knew that that was possible, but I've never done something like that before. Like rebuilding your life after something like that is not always the easiest thing to do. And I think I don't know if I would have believed myself, but I think now, absolutely.
Yeah. I think it's always interesting, but like not, because I've done this so many times, and having a similar question at the end of our conversations, so many people, no matter what event happened in their lives, traumatic, happy, whatever it may be, the most said response is you're going to be okay.
Yeah.
And I think that most of us would not have believed it, because in the moment everything feels so heavy. You feel like you're the only person going through something like this. You feel so very alone, and you're like, how am I going to
How?
move through the next moment?
How am I going to do it?
Yep.
Like, how am I going to do it? What is it going to look like? Am I going to be able to? Like those are all real emotions, and those are all things that are very, very, very real. And I think it always brings me back to that point that I mentioned earlier. It's you versus you. That's something that I tell myself every single day. I'm a mentor to a few kids, and I always kind of remind them that it's you versus you in this world. And I always try to tell myself, okay, Eugene, you're going to be the better version of yourself than you were last week. You're going to be the better version of yourself than you were 3 days ago. And you're going to operate today in a better way that you operated yesterday because it's you versus you.
Yeah, well, it's also important to have the skills to believe yourself when you're saying those things, which I'm sure at the beginning, people starting affirmations are saying it just as to create a habit. And then eventually you start to believe and embody those particular affirmations. Did you find that same journey?
Absolutely. There's so much power in the tongue. Like the words that you say out of like that's why a lot of people manifest because when you start to believe these things, they tend to come true. You know what I'm saying? So
Yeah.
I think that for me, it wasn't the easiest thing to do, but I did it. You know what I'm saying? And do not get me wrong, there's definitely days where it's not always the easiest for me, but knowing that, I have the power to speak into myself and believe in myself and that it's me versus me, that's it. Like I can't, there's nothing better than that.
Sky's the limit.
And it's only
Or
you
maybe
in
it's
it.
not.
That's
Maybe
it.
there is no limit.
The one thing that my mom always told me was that, what did she always used to say? If the sky is the limit, then buy a cloud. Like, and that like spoke to me. If you're saying that the sky's the limit, I'm gonna just buy the whole cloud. Like I can do anything. You know what I'm saying? Like that's it.
Yeah. So if someone is listening to your story, they've gone through something similar or something you said about your journey resonated with them, like what's the best way to find you, find your book, like get in your circle and maybe tell you how your story impacted them?
Yeah, so EugeneZBertrand.com. That's my website. And I'm on LinkedIn. And my book is at Barnes and Noble, Amazon, anywhere you're looking for a book, you can find mine. So Eugene Z. Bertrand.
And can you say the name of your book again?
Yes, Resilience, Breaking the Chains.
Awesome. Well, I encourage anyone listening. I think, as Eugene has said multiple times, there's so much power in putting your story to words, whether that's saying it out loud, sharing it with a friend, writing it, whatever it may be, podcasting. So if you're out there listening and you feel alone in your circumstance and maybe something Eugene said resonated with you, I would go to his website, find the contact page, or go to LinkedIn and send him a message and just tell him a part of your story, because you'll get to feel that power and kind of take back that power in your story. I didn't realize, I think I knew on the surface, the power of storytelling, but having these conversations really shows me that for the person telling the story, the person hearing the story, the person engaging in the story, there's so much power in so many angles. So thank you for sharing your story in this way, Eugene.
Thank you for sharing yours and allowing me to do the same.
Well, this is what I'm going to keep doing, and I think it's important. Like we said earlier, we never know what someone's going through, and someone is going through exactly what you went through, and maybe hearing your story will give them some kind of power they didn't know they needed.
Absolutely.
You know,
My goal is to encourage others.
yeah.
And, I
Well,
hope
you're doing
that,
it.
thank you. I appreciate that.
Yeah, you're doing it, and you're gonna be doing it even more so with your master's degree, right?
Can't wait. Can't wait, Matt. I
Well,
can't wait.
you got to
Super
finish it
excited.
first, right?
Finish strong.
Yeah.
We finish strong. That's what
How
we
much
do.
longer do you have?
I graduate in May of 26, so
Sweet.
coming up
It's
really
coming up.
quick.
Yep.
Yeah, very quickly.
Well, good luck to you in the rest of that
Thank you.
journey. I know that the rest of your life is to be written, and you will
Thank you.
certainly write each chapter and make it a bestseller, right? Is that what you said?
Yeah,
Yeah,
exactly.
I like that.
Resilience.
Yep.
Thank you very much.
Is a key. Yeah, no, for sure. And thank you all for listening and just being a part of the Life Shift every week. It has been a joy. As hard as some of these conversations are, it just shows me how much we have in common with each other as it relates to how we feel about certain parts of our lives. And we can connect in this way if we just are willing to listen. So thank you all for being a part of this journey. Thank you, Eugene, for this. And with that, I'm going to say goodbye, and I'll be back next week.
Bye, everyone.
Thank you for listening to the Life Shift podcast. If you want to learn more, go to www.thelifeshiftpodcast.com. There you can check out all the different episodes. You can check out the blog, some of the reviews for the podcast, and the Life Shift journal. Links are there so you can purchase your own copy, whether in digital or print format. Thanks again.